Hi there, and thanks for joining me today on Geezers of Gear, episode number 203. So, today's podcast is brought to you by a new sponsor, Live Event Productions. Amplify every experience with live events, an end to end event production company offering off the charts solutions for your sound, light, video rigging, FX, and equipment rental needs. Live Events' full-service event production team is an assembly of companies including Active Production and Design, Delicate Productions, Gemini Sound, Light and Video, Pyrotechnico Effects, and Zenith Lighting. From intimate gatherings to stadium-size spectacles, their brands produce the perfect mix of production elements to best serve your needs. Whether you are setting up for a singular event or world tour, Live Events have gear available for rent or purchase. Their precision-balanced approach seamlessly integrates sound, light, video, and FX to arrive at optimal solutions for your event or installation. Achieve audio awesomeness and visual brilliance, while the Live Events family of professionals provide an unforgettable service style and experience. If you dream it, they can do it. Allow Live Events to perfect your production from concept to curtain drop. Contact Live Events, your humble servants of heck yeah, today by visiting liveevents.com. And today's podcast is also brought to you by Elation Professional. Elation offers its Stadium Trio for large-scale arena and stadium projects that require only the most brilliant luminaires. The Proteus Brutus and LED Wash FX light with up to 75,000 lumens of cutting power, the Proteus Excalibur, the brightest IP65 full-featured beam fixture on the market, and the Proteus Maximus, a 50,000 lumen LED profile luminaire with a complete FX system. They all come equipped with Elation's proven IP65 Proteus protection, the Proteus Excalibur and Maximus, a powerhouse trio of compatible luminaires for maximum impact indoors or out. Check them both out at elationlighting.com. So it's me again. Hi. Again, thanks for joining me, episode 203. I'm kind of excited today. I've actually read this gentleman's book. So today's guest, among other things, is an author. I'll give you basically his bio here. Luke began touring as a freelance front of house audio engineer in 2005 and eventually a production manager as well. Having toured with bands for over 15 years, Luke has visited all 50 states and over 35 countries. He's coordinated production for NFL halftime performances, worked in legendary venues, including Radio City Music Hall in New York, and entertained troops abroad aboard the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. Luke began writing a blog for the live event production industry in 2019, which you can find at theefficienthustle.com/blog. He's also recently released a self-published book for aspiring tour and production managers called The Efficient Hustle. With an emphasis on professionalism and efficiency, he wrote this book to help aspiring touring and production managers set themselves apart from their peers. So it's a mouthful. He's done a lot, and he only started in 2005. So some of us who are a little bit older are a bit jealous, but he's done a lot, and great guy, great book. I just finished reading it and quite enjoyed it. And so please welcome Mr. Luke Meek. Luke, how are you?
Man, I'm doing good. It's good to be here. I broke my morning routine of going to the gym, and went flying an airplane instead because that's my hobby that I don't really do often enough.
First world choices. Do I go to the beautiful gym and work out and, sustain my life, or do I jump up in an airplane and fly around? Where do you live?
Yeah, I'm just outside of Nashville in Goodlettsville, Tennessee.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you're flying around in the mountains and stuff, or just
I haven't gotten that far yet. I usually do shorter flights and just kind of bump around here and go over. This morning I went up into Kentucky a little bit. So, yeah, man, just a little bit of everything, just to keep my skills sharp,
Yeah. Do you have a plane, or you rent it whenever you want to go out flying?
Yeah, I just rent a plane.
I've got lots of friends who are pilots, and I've sort of had a mixed bag of, it's not worth buying a plane, and there's nothing like owning your own plane. It's just like a boat or whatever, right? What? So
Yeah,
I,
exactly. And I think, yeah, yeah, yeah. They always say like, the best days of owning a boat are your first day and last day. The day you buy it, the day you sell it. I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity to own an airplane yet, but I always say like, time will, if it's meant to be, it'll be. I'm happy just to do whatever I can to get in the
you
air.
know, that boat saying, I've always disagreed with it. Like, I think I've had lots of boats. I live normally in South Florida, but now I spend the summers up. I've got a house in Western Canada, and but I've had a lot of boats, and I think it's every day in between. I don't think it's the day you
Right,
buy it or the day you sell it. I think it's every day in between. Those 2 days are really frustrating and stressful days. Every
right,
day
right.
in between is unbelievable. You know, those are the days that you bought the boat for, right? So,
Yeah, I had a boat when I was young, when I was younger as well, and I loved it. You're right. It's great.
you know, it's
As is flying.
I'm an A type, pretty high stress businessman, entrepreneur, and I gotta admit, like boating, the very first time I bought a boat, which was I don't know, 27, 28 years ago, 29 years ago now. Um, it was the very first time I went, this is like peace. You know, I found just this thing that I hadn't found, and you probably find it with flying now too, I would guess, because you're not thinking about anything else. You're just thinking about, the instruments and what's around you and not dying.
Absolutely. That's the best thing is like,
Yeah.
yeah, when you're in the air, you focus on nothing but being in the air and staying in the air, and that
Yeah.
it like no matter what's going on in work and life and stress, man, yeah, it's just like it you get I'll get done, come back, park the plane and be like, man, like everything goes away. All that stress goes away for that time because it kind of has to. You have to focus on what you're doing. And I think that's definitely not the only, but part of the appeal of it for me is just shutting everything off and just enjoying being in the air.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
peaceful.
No, that's incredible. A couple of weeks ago, I had, well, probably a month ago now, I had a friend of mine, lighting designer named Steve Lieberman, who does a lot of EDM stuff, does a lot of big
Mm.
super clubs and stuff like that. Really, really great lighting designer. I've been friends with him for 30 years, but I don't know, 10 years ago or something, he got big into flying. And I think he has his own plane, though. He's in Southern California, and he does a lot of work in Las Vegas because he works a lot with a company that's based out of Vegas called Insomniac, who does all the big
Oh yeah,
EDM
yeah, of
festivals.
course.
And so he flies back and forth to Vegas quite a lot on his own plane. And he says, there's
Mm.
nothing like it because you can walk out of the
That's
gig
the
and
way
be
to do it.
home, be home within 90 minutes hugging your
Yeah,
kids. So,
that's so great.
yeah. So yeah, good for you, man. That's a cool morning. Sorry if I disrupted your morning too much, but
Nah, it's all good, man. I got
we
up there and I got home, so
we
yeah, it
had to get
worked.
this done. Actually, last week we were supposed to record last week, and I had a sort of last minute jaunt to Europe that I had to do, and so I appreciate
Yeah,
you
crazy.
being flexible and allowing me to make that happen and
Yeah,
getting this
no, it's
done
cool.
today.
My whole summer has kind of been in flux as well, and it's taking things have changed a little bit here and there, and I get it. Like that's the world we live in, so
Yeah.
it's all good. Yeah.
Oops, I forget what we were talking about, but I just had to pause you for a sec for a little audio repair. But yeah, so we were talking
Well,
about
let's
flying. We were talking about
flying. Yeah. Well, let's talk what we all want to talk about, which is production, right? It's the
yeah,
geezers of gear.
absolutely. Yeah, so first I want to know, like, again, my show's called Geezers of Gear. A lot of my friends, myself, a lot of people in the industry that end up on my show. Not everyone, but lots of people are older. And you're obviously younger. You got into the business in 2005. Um, and so, I'm curious how you got into it because, the guys and girls who got into it in the 80s and even 70s and even early 90s, most of the time there was no training for it. There was no plan. It was just like I was sitting in a
Hmm.
pub and somebody came and said, "Hey, jump in the back of my truck. We need an audio guy or whatever, or a lighting guy or a roadie." Um,
Yeah.
so how'd you get into it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that I'm not quite a geezer yet. It's good to be on the Geezers Gear podcast. And I'm looking through the history of some of your guests. I'm like, some people that I know, some people that I've worked directly with, some people that I just admire from afar.
Yeah.
So it's, let me just say, it's an honor to be a part of some of
Oh,
those
thanks.
folks. And I hear a lot of those stories of. I think I kind of came in when when it wasn't just, oh, I just happened to be sitting in a pub and they needed somebody help me, help out. So I wasn't quite in that, but I'm also, long story short, I did go to audio school. Um, and it was in the early stages of, those kind of schools, but definitely not where it was just completely random. So,
Right.
my story is like, I was going to community college at the time after high school. And I was like, all right, like sooner or later, I got to pick a field of study other than just 13th and 14th grade, which, was what I consider my community college was. Uh, and I was like, just trying to think, like, what could I do? Because I didn't want to, long story, I just didn't want to sit in a cubicle. I'm like, I cannot do
Right.
a 9 to 5. Even then, I'm like, I can't. I just knew it wasn't for me. And so, I was like, well, I wasn't a musician, but I was like, I love music. Maybe I could do something in music. And so my studies were audio, primarily recording studios. So I went to audio school with a heavy focus on recording studios, and then eventually over time, because I'm from small town Iowa, and after audio school, I went to audio school in Minneapolis, went home for a while to regroup, put some money in the bank and whatnot. And by default, there's a lot more live sound venues in Iowa than there were recording studios, at least at that time, and I think probably is still the case.
Yeah.
And so I did a couple internships straight out of school, but my first gigs were live sound.
Interesting. So we're talking like 2002, three, something like that.
Yeah, about then, like I graduated audio school in '98, and
Okay.
so my first like house gig was '99. So like I know you said I kind of got my start in the industry in '05. That's basically when I started being a freelance guy. So like
Ah,
'99, I did a couple years of just evenings and weekends, club gigs and random one-off stuff. And then I left Iowa, went to Denver for 3 years, and that's when I had my first full-time job in the production industry. I worked for a production house that did everything, lighting, video, audio, backline,
okay.
power, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
that was kind of where I really started to cut my teeth on the industry in general, not just being a front of house guy.
But
Um,
you weren't a musician or a DJ or anything. Like you just, for
no,
some reason,
yeah,
took an interest in being an audio guy.
yeah. Like I love music, and looking back at it now, I'm like, it makes sense that I do live sound now because I loved live shows. I loved the environment. I loved live music. I loved all of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't play an instrument. It's just like, man, that seems cool. And for whatever reason, I don't know. I think I've never considered myself a super creative person, which is probably why I didn't get into instrument trying to
Yeah.
learn an instrument. I mean, I did. I would play trumpet and for a few years in like elementary, middle school age, and like it didn't stick. So for whatever reason, I just wasn't interested in picking up an instrument and becoming a rock star. But I loved the industry and it was intriguing to me. So that was kind of my way into it.
Well, and it's, fast forwarding now 20 years or whatever, it was probably a good move because I'm guessing there's more gigs for audio guys than there are trumpet players.
Yeah, right.
I'm
Exactly.
just
You
guessing.
join a ska band, maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
Could have been
I
fun.
mean, I love trumpets, but there's not a lot
Same.
of gigs. Like when you go look at the want ads, there's not a lot of trumpet player wanted ads. I guess.
Man,
Well, maybe I'm
yeah.
wrong.
So lucky for me, I chose what I chose because when you're young like that, you don't. I feel like there are some people, but very few people at that age, on 19, 20, are like, "This is it. Here we go." Like,
Yeah,
it kind of unfolds how it unfolds, and I've been lucky a million times over and been in the right place at the right time a million times over, and all the hard work and all that is
of
part of it too.
course.
But
Yeah. No,
it
and
kind of
we talk.
you can't
Yeah,
plan it.
yeah, we talk a lot about that stuff on my podcast because I'm a big fan of not only hard work but just like creating a career for yourself, not just coming out of school and going, okay, somebody better hire me, like actually
Yeah,
working your way up into a career and being trustworthy and being the person that everyone goes, yeah, Luke can get this done. If anybody's going to get this done, it's going to be Luke. And
right.
one of the side note here, which we'll have a few sidebars because I'm one of these. Oh, look, squirrel. Um,
Yeah,
but I was looking at your history and your bio and your LinkedIn and stuff, and I saw a certificate from Seth Godin's Akimbo Workshops, and I've been a
yeah,
big Seth guy, so I'll give you a quick story here. So when I started my company, Gear Source, in 2002, for 6 months, 8 months before that, I was basically trying to figure out what to do next. I had uh, run and been an executive at lots of automated lighting manufacturers. And I owned a small piece of the one that I had just left. And I just didn't want to keep going in that world. I just didn't want to keep grinding a new brand, a new brand, a new brand.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I needed to do something else. And all I knew, so remember, this is 2001. All I knew
Mm-hmm.
was that it had to be on the internet. You know, the internet was still a new thing at that point.
Right.
And I had this, at the time, I had a condo in Canada. Now I have a house in Canada, in near Banff in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, and I had my place in Florida. And I was like, I kind of want to be able to be in either place and nobody cares because I'm still getting my work done, which was basically my version of saying I want to be remote. But
Yeah.
at the time, remote wasn't really a thing yet. But so
Right.
I focused on the internet and I started doing some research and I came up with this guy called Seth Godin. And
Mm.
again, this is 2001. At the time, he had a set of CDs that he was pimping out called something really cheesy, like Making Money on the Internet or something like that. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm looking to do. And so I listened to this CD set over and over and over again. And so Seth, I'll try and shorten this, but one of the things he told a story about I think it was a hippo or a rhino, one of the two, that would basically lay in the mud with his mouth open, and these little
Mm.
birds, a certain type of bird, would fly into the hippo's mouth and would eat all the shit off of his teeth. And
Right.
moral of the story is the bird survived from that food off of the hippo's teeth, and the hippo got clean teeth. So he was basically saying, start an internet company where you're taking little bits from lots of companies. It's a small expense for them, but to you, this is your living, right? And that's
Right.
what I created with Gear Source, and it was all about Seth Godin. So
Yeah,
he
I love
became
that.
he
Yeah.
became a guru. I read his blog every day. I listen to most of his books. Um,
We could do a whole episode on that guy. I mean,
he's
his
brilliant.
he is an I'm a huge fan. So yeah, I did the one of his akimbo workshops during 2020, actually, when I actually had the time to do it. And a lot of, you can say what you want about the pandemic, but man, like there's definitely some good things come out of it, and that was
Oh
one for
heck
me.
yeah,
Is like I was at home and I had the time to take this writing workshop, which I'll be honest, like my I took this writing workshop. I put the book I was writing at the time, I put that on pause and took this workshop, and like the book is infinitely better because of this workshop, and I'm grateful that I had that opportunity to take that workshop.
yeah,
And I'm very proud of how the books turned out, and a lot of it I can credit to that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, Seth Godin's a genius, business
yeah,
genius.
we'll get into the book, but yeah, I mean,
Sure.
he's just got some great ideas. He's one of the gurus of internet marketing and permission marketing, which he was one of the guys who started the whole permission marketing thing, building email lists and stuff. And so yeah, I've been a follower of his for over 20 years. So I was just surprised when I read that. I was like, whoa, I don't see too many
Yeah.
people that credit Seth Godin for being
Yeah. Right.
important to
That's
their career.
cool. And
So
he loves chocolate, and I love chocolate. So like that's
yeah,
another
dark
feather in
chocolate
the cap for
only.
that guy. Yeah,
He only
exactly,
does
man. I
dark
love
chocolate.
it.
I love dark
That's
chocolate
so
too.
cool.
Yeah. I don't
There you
know,
go.
that I'm as fancy as he is though. Like I like,
Right. Right.
what I've found, and I don't know if you've had it, but I'm sure you have. You've been to Europe and all over the world lots. But in England, there's a chocolate called Bourneville.
Mm,
That there's a
I'm not
Bourneville dark
familiar.
chocolate. So my girlfriend is British, and her mom found out I like dark chocolate. So she just, anytime somebody was visiting over there, she'd send back a couple of these chocolate bars for me of this Bourneville chocolate, and it's just become my go-to. Again, it's nothing fancy. It's a
Right.
British brand, and it's so
I love
good.
that.
So yeah, if you
All
ever get a
right. I'm
chance to
in.
try Bourneville, go for it.
Absolutely.
So
Heck
what
yeah.
was your first tour? So you got out of school, you are an audio guy, you did some club gigs and stuff, and
Hmm.
eventually, I don't know if did you plan to go out and start touring, or that just kind of happened organically?
Well, I plan to travel. Like after doing a couple of years of local production work in Denver, I realized like I just I was young. I wanted to travel. And so my initial thought was, and I had been doing a bunch of research on like cruise ships because I'm like, well, that way I can put everything in storage. I don't have zero overhead, and I'm just going to put money in the bank. I'm going to travel, and I'm going to make money and get better at production. So I was like, I was checked a lot of boxes for me. And then there was a band from Iowa that I had met in my club days, who, they had come through Denver. I just went to see them and say hi to them. And they're like, what do you, of course, what are you doing? What are you up to? I'm like, well, I'm about to, start applying and get a job on a cruise ship and do that. And like, well, we need a front of house guy. You want to do that? I was like, absolutely. So I
Huh.
knew I wanted to travel and do production. I wasn't against touring, but that wasn't the only thing. I just like production and travel. And so, that's how it kind of came to be. I moved back to Iowa to work for this band. So to answer your question, my first tour was with this band basically for 3 years. Like they were a regional band, so they didn't do big chunks of touring really, but it was like, weekends, 3-4 days a week, whatever, kind of all year long. And then
Yeah.
every once in a while we'd go out and do a few extended runs, like to the West Coast or East Coast or whatever, or down south, and do a couple weeks at a time. And so that was my main gig. I just worked for them, and that was like 2005. That's when I consider myself like, that's when I really became a freelancer, because they were my main artists that I worked for those 3 years. But they had their own record label and some other bands on the labels. So when they weren't busy, I would do stuff with some of their other artists and stuff like that. And then,
And they
so
never
I
exploded and
toured.
and did arenas or anything. So they never allowed you to grow, really.
Right. Yeah. I kind of hit my, peak with them pretty early on, within
Yeah.
a year and a half. But then I kept going with them for 3 years total. But yeah, they never blew up or got huge and did arenas, but they're still going, and that's something to say.
So,
They just said their 30-year anniversary this year, which
oh,
is pretty
that's
cool.
very cool. And you still see them and stuff?
I see them. Yeah, just last week I went back because they were doing a 4-day run that ended in Nashville. I was like, hey, can I just come hang out? And then you guys drop me off at home when you're done.
Oh,
So
that's
I went and
awesome.
hung out with them, and they're doing their thing. And they were, I was along with them in 2018, inducted to the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's very cool. What are they
So very
called?
cool. They were inducted. They're called the Nadas, Nadas.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, very cool band.
And questions. So when you started like working with them and stuff, and even in school, like, did you learn on analog consoles or was it already digital by that time?
Yeah, I was like right kind of on that fine line. Like I learned, like my live sound class was an analog console. Even the all the studio stuff was analog consoles, but like we were recording, like back then it was primarily we were recording to ADAT. So like
Yeah.
8-channel ADATs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sync those up. And then like the only thing in my studies, the only thing we used like Pro Tools for example, was like mastering, which, I think other audio schools at that time were probably already multi-tracking and stuff in Pro Tools, but I didn't do that. It was like we would do stuff in Digital Performer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of on that line of like, okay, digital is definitely happening, and some people were doing albums digital by then, but still analog was very, very prevalent. In my early career, I, for years was primarily still analog, and then eventually, more and more digital consoles would show up, and venues would start getting them and whatever.
So you were
But
you were
yeah,
specking PM 3000s and stuff, and then all of a sudden it
mhm,
was, whatever, like the next.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of outboard gear.
It's interesting because, I don't know if that's better or worse learning both ways. I think in some sense, it's a lot better. But you really do have to learn again. It's like I used to be able to walk up to a Soundcraft console or a Yamaha console and be able to figure out at least how to make it sound decent, whoever was playing.
Right.
Today I have no idea. Like all this Dante stuff and everything, I have no idea. I can't figure it out because, I don't
Yeah.
need to, but um,
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword a little bit. Like there are tons of obvious benefits to it. Like, load your file and instant recall and all that stuff is great. And you can make a console so user definable. And if you're taking that thing out for how many months on a tour, it's really nice to have everything exactly where you want it. But I think the only difference, the downside to it, being for me personally, anyways, is like, yeah, a console was essentially a console. You knew that as long as you knew one channel strip and you knew the master section, you were good. And now they're just all computers, and you have to learn every single one of them is its own surface, it's its own operating system, and that takes some getting used to. And like I struggle a bit sometimes when I'm like, man, I just like because I'll like I get in that comfort zone. Like, all right, now like I've been on SD12s a lot the last year. I'm like, okay, I just want to spec those because I know them. But then it's like, well, yeah, but sooner or later someone's gonna need me on an S6L, and I've been on them and I kind of know 'em, but I'm not fluent. So, it's like, but how do you be fluent on all of them when if you're on tour, you're fluent on whatever you're on tour with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
you're
tough in
right.
that regard. And I just over the years just come to learn and appreciate the idea of like just ask for help, like go to Claire
Yeah.
and tip that console for a couple of days and just ask him like, hey, I don't know this thing. Or like what I did last year before I took the SD12 on tours. I went to Claire, I tipped the console, and then I just started YouTubing through everything. And then
Yeah.
like my approach was like, okay, I'm going to build a file for this tour I'm about to do, and then as I would build the file, I would block, and then I would look that up, watch 3 videos on that, and then learn how to do it, and then keep going until I hit my next roadblock, watch some more videos. So there's a little more time invested in getting fluent on a console than there used to
Yeah.
be because it's essentially an OS. You know.
Yeah. No, I mean, and again, before, like whether it was, a Yamaha console or Soundcraft or Midas or whatever it was, a console's a console's a console. It's all pretty much the
Yeah.
same. You've got an EQ, you've got volume, you've got gain, you've got all these things on every channel. It's
Hmm.
pretty much the same thing. But lighting directors have obviously the same problem where when you're on an MA console, it's very different than a Hog console, which is very different than an Avo console, and you got to kind of learn a whole new language and syntax and all of that stuff. It's not like you can just flip a switch and say, hey, act like an MA console, and
Yeah.
and you're suddenly working in MA mode or whatever. Like maybe that's what people need to do, but still the buttons and everything will be in different places. But yeah, I mean, and what lighting
Yeah.
people
You're
usually
learning it.
do is they'll just hire a board operator. They'll just hire a guy to come in and I'll tell you what to do. You make that console do
Right.
it, right?
Yeah.
So
Right. That's kind of crazy in itself. It almost creates a job. It creates work for some people. Like, hey, just get really good at this one console and nail it, and be super
yeah,
efficient on it. So
yeah.
somebody can holler at you instructions and you can do it immediately. I mean, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, I read your book, and we'll get into that.
Oh,
But
awesome.
one of the things that I learned in your book was a new band that I didn't know anything about, Owl City,
Cool.
and so that was obviously, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me like that was a big turning point in your career where it went from clubs and odd gigs and stuff to boom, I'm playing big venues now. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, it was like, the year before that. So the story in the book is like a 7 month period of a tour that I did with that band Owl City. Um, so I used that story or that timeline specifically because yeah, it was like as a production manager, I'd been on the road a decent amount by then, but as a production manager, and I had even been doing production management stuff by then, but this was the first one where it was like, yeah, TV and international stuff and tour, traveling all over the world and carrying gear and carnets and all that stuff. So it was like definitely jumping in the deep end as a production manager. Because like the year before that tour, I had been out with a band called Need to Breathe, we opened up for Taylor Swift for her Speak Now tour. So I had even at that point been in big room, big spaces, big venues.
Okay.
But again, as a production manager and like running the show, it was crazy as
Yeah.
far as learning, the learning curve in that regard
So what
was
was
big
your
time.
first big arena show then?
My very first show, like little show, was that band I first toured with in Iowa
Oh, they
called
did
the
arenas.
Nadas. Like, well, here's the story. I'd started with them in like August, and later that year, just a few months after I'd started with them, Bon Jovi went on tour, and Bon Jovi on that tour, I don't remember what tour it was. They did a thing where every local promoter, or I don't know how they did it, but they would do a contest and like a local band would open every
Oh,
show.
very cool.
And
Yeah.
the band I worked for was the local opener. And so that was my first front of house experience in an
That had
arena
to
level.
be that had
And
to
then
be
of
cool.
course it kind of I was, yeah, I was like, wow, this is what's
Did it
up.
sound good?
So I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. I got
Yeah.
compliments,
Oh,
it was
that's
good.
good.
But
You
I
had to
was,
be a bit
pretty young
nervous
in
though,
my
right?
oh yeah, of course. I mean, I was only a couple months into touring as a front of house guy. So I've been doing audio even then for a chunk of years, but first, so it was early on in my career and it was great. And it definitely inspired me to want to do more of that. So that was like my first experience in an arena level. And then I didn't really get back into, doing stuff at that level until 2011 when I was with Need to Breathe and they opened for the Taylor Swift tour, which was at that point she was doing mostly arenas and then a couple stadiums here or there.
Huh.
So, but then that was the only tour ever actually that I've toured as a monitor engineer. So I was the monitors for that. And then I got into doing more front of house stuff, for bigger rooms like that in like probably 2013 with Owl City when they did a run opening for Maroon 5. And then from there, it's just, been all kinds of different stuff.
So how do you get
For
these
direct
gigs?
support.
Is it through like the sound company? Is Claire or somebody calling you up and saying, hey Luke, are you available? Or like
Yeah,
how do you
I'm
connect with these
freelance,
bands?
so it's a little bit of everything. Early on, it was, I will say, I've done some work here there from like Claire calling me up, but usually those are like, hey, like we need a gear rep and, Katy Perry's doing rehearsals. We're going to deliver a bunch of gear there. Just go help the techs with what they need. But most of the like touring gigs, I would say majority of the touring gigs I get is all networking, just being on the road. So like, I would be with an artist who was opening for a band. And then the next tour, that band that we were opening for would call me up because I got to know those guys and they would bring me out. And then it just
Mm,
kind
right.
of climbed from there. And to this day, it really is, it's, networking and who you know and like my friend Kenny Barnwell says, it's not who you know, it's who knows you, and that's definitely
True.
true. It's
Very
like
well
who
said. Yeah.
I know a lot of people, sure, but do they know? Are they thinking of me when the time comes?
Well, and what do
So
they think? It's like
right, right,
I've
right.
talked to so many people who are like, basically they have this don't be an asshole mentality when you're on the road. And
Mhm.
by following sort of that mantra of don't be an asshole, you'll get a lot more calls, because if you're, breaking all the bus rules and breaking all the, just unwritten rules and all that stuff, like people aren't
Killing the
going to,
vibe.
yeah, you're not going to get the first call.
No, and I would say, I say, as I get older, more, into the career, like I'm just like it to me, like the people on the tour and who we're working with day to day is almost more important than the money because like you can make money but like man if these people are unpleasant I'm out, like I can't do it. And
Yeah.
so I think that's everything, and as a production manager I'd rather hire someone that's a great person and represents the crew and the artist in a good manner. But needs a little training. I'd rather have somebody come in and kind of get them up to speed on the gig as long as they're a good person rather than hire a super
Yeah.
veteran who's great but like sucks to be around. Like
Yeah.
it's just not worth it to
Well, it's the
me.
same for me with employees. I'd rather I've always sort of had the philosophy hire character and train skills basically, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's
And
that's exactly why I look at
you're spending a lot of time with these people and you want to go to battle with people that you trust and believe in and you enjoy being around.
it.
So,
Yeah.
especially on a tour like you guys,
Oh man.
it's not easy to get away from each other, you're in pretty
Yeah,
tight quarters.
you're a
Yeah.
family, whether you
Yeah.
like it or not. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not just like, do we work well together? It's like, well, do I want to spend my off day on, with them in a restaurant, or like, we're going to send the bus for dinner, like whatever it may be. Like, it's
Yeah.
just so important. I
Yeah,
think it's huge.
absolutely. So, how did you connect with Owl City, and how did that thing, because again, I read the book, so I know the story, but
Yeah, yeah.
people
Right, right,
listening probably, for the most part, other than your family and stuff, they don't know the story. I'm guessing, but
right. Yeah.
literally, like to me, it from reading about it, it started kind of small and it just exploded over time, primarily based
Yeah.
on one big
So,
hit, I guess, too, right?
yes. Well, so I will say, yeah, the way I got the gig is, that was an association with management. I had worked with another artist. I'd done some tours with another artist that specific management was also managing.
Okay.
And then, I had been kept in touch with that management and that artist. And then at some point they were like, hey, we need somebody for this position on this, tour coming up. And of course I was interested.
So, were you hired for
And
audio
then
or production management?
both. Yeah, I was hired for
Okay.
both. I did both.
Okay.
And then ever since then, I've almost almost always wear both hats until there's been a couple tours that I do just as production management. But most of the time I do both. And these days I try to only actually do front of house, even though ironically my book is about production and tour management. I try to steer clear of that stuff these days, partially because I want to do audio and then focus on other things like writing and do my blog and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So and the
Yeah.
workload doesn't allow as much extracurricular stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I try to just do front
knowing
of
who you
house.
want to
But
be is a big is a big
yeah,
thing, like people might
yeah,
say, "Are you crazy? There's so much more money in production management or whatever," right?
sure,
And I may be
sure.
completely wrong, by the way, but
No, I mean,
um,
there's definitely more money to be had, but it's quality of life on the road. And
right.
if the day off's the day off to do other things, and I like that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, to answer your question, I was hired to do both for that tour. And then Owl City, they had already had their initial, before I came on board, they had already had one initial hit, solo, a couple, probably, I don't know, a year or two before that. And then right as I came on board, that's why things got crazy, is they had a song with them featuring Carly Rae Jepsen. And that thing, about the time I came on board, that song was released, and it was kind of a summer hit, went really big. And that's why we were, all the touring and the routing was what it was. We were going to be going all over the world and all over the country and doing shows. But then all the other stuff got thrown in, like a bunch of TV and promo and all that stuff that, like, as a production manager, was like, whoa, like it was a heavy lift for,
Yeah.
figuring
Yeah.
that out, but then also figuring out how you take gear around the world and dealing with carnets and customs and all that stuff.
Had you done international touring before, or was that your
No,
first? So
yeah,
this
no,
was
that
your
was it. I
first.
like, yeah, I'd gone in and out of Canada a little bit, but
Yeah.
this was that's why it was like, not only was it my first international stuff, but it was like crazy route, so busy, and then all the extracurricular stuff in the TV, and doing TV in Japan and Australia and stuff like that, and then a bunch of it in the US. So it was
Yeah.
a big learning curve on that.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I mean, again, we're going to dive headfirst into the book here shortly, but you did a great job explaining sort of how that all happened, and you could just, in reading the book, you could feel how it kind of started, and then there was this ground rumble, and what was the song called?
Right.
Good Time, right?
Good time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy because now I'm humming it because I had to go watch it on YouTube to figure out who these people were and stuff when I was reading your book.
Sure.
And I think I saw they did AGT and like the Tonight
Yeah.
Show and all the big stuff. So
Yeah.
they really did blow up, huh?
Yeah. I mean, that song it was a crazy time to be involved. Good. It was good. I did enjoy it. It was just a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and so from a production management standpoint, like, so you start the tour here. Here's your plan. Here's your package, that was
hmm
specced out for the tour and stuff, lighting, sound, whatever. Um, did that evolve as that song and the band kind of really broke and took off? Like, did that evolve? Did the package get bigger? Did you start moving from theaters into arenas, for example? Or was it already basically routed and you just did what you did?
Well, yeah, essentially it was routed and we did what we did, partially because, this, so like we had, the song, that song was the first release off of that album that came out shortly after the single. So we had like a short couple weeks in the US, followed by a short couple weeks in Europe and Asia, as like quote unquote like promo stuff. So we were doing like underplays and clubs. So by default, that was a smaller production. It was like a bus and trailer thing, just to like
Right.
start getting the buzz out about the song and stuff. But then yeah, then the song got crazy. So but by then, the tour was booked. So the tour was what it was. So then in the fall we went out as a bigger thing, a much more extensive run, US, Europe, and Asia. And the production was much bigger. We had a semi full of gear and stuff like that. And then of course all the TV stuff. So
Yeah.
the TV production elements were kind of what took a lot of my time. Cause yeah, like once the design was done, it was what it was. But the TV stuff was like, every show is different. Everything has to be different look. And so there was a lot of those
Well, and that was
meetings and
all a learning.
conversations.
That was all a learning thing for you
Right.
too, right? Because
Yeah.
you'd never done TV, you'd never done, live television, or you'd never done,
Yeah.
whatever, like any of that stuff. So, like, did you find that really difficult, or was it pretty easy? Were people kind to you, or were they intimidating? Like, how did that all go?
For the most part, everybody's pretty cool. And I don't have a problem. They always say fake it till you make it, which I agree to a point. But I also don't have a problem admitting when I need help. So like, if it was a learning curve, because if you go do like, like a Letterman, like back in the day, it was like Letterman or something like that. And I was like, if you
Hmm.
go do Jimmy Fallon or that, like, there's not a ton of production involved, but like when we're doing like America's Got Talent, we were bringing it was a whole thing, And so I had that, and that's what I was kind of learning on the fly. Is like, oh, this show's going to be like a full on production, and we're going to bring in stuff, and we need somebody to program the lighting. And then we would go do like, one of the other talk shows, and it would be pretty straightforward. Maybe we'd do a little bit of floor lighting or something. And so yeah, I was just kind of learning it all on the fly, and having these different conversations with these different people. And to be fair, management knew, like when they hired me for the gig, that it was a few steps above anything I had done. And so they brought in a senior like production manager who had been doing arenas and stuff for years, and kind of like on call for me when I did have questions.
Yeah.
And that was a help, because I would call them up and be like, hey, what about this? And what do I do for this? And they want like
Yeah.
this full rider. What do I do with this? And so that was, I had people to lean on. And being at that point, I was maybe a little nervous, but I just realized over time, like, there's no shame in saying, hey, I need help. Call this
Right. Of
person. And
course. No, and from your book, obviously, one of the things that I learned about you really quickly is how incredibly organized and like your advances are incredible, and your communication is so rigid and by the book, and we got to talk here, 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 and here, and these are all the different
right.
points that we need to touch, and like you plan for the problems more than a lot of people that I've been around. And you plan for, the inevitable and all of that kind of stuff, which, I think
Yeah.
is a great trait. It's a very good trait.
Yeah. And I learned a lot of that. And that's a big reason why I wrote the book about that period of my life, because I learned all that on that tour, like with so much going on, like US and then Europe and then Asia and then TV and all this. It's like, if you're not keeping good notes and good records, it's gonna get ugly real quick. And then also what made me be more efficient at communication and stuff, because like, man, when there's a million emails going on about 10 different shows and
Yeah.
different tours, at like, you have to keep that straight too, but also be efficient about it. Like, get to the point. Like, it just has to be that way
So,
when the stakes are that high and you're that busy.
100%. Yeah, I agree completely. So, why did you write a book? Like, I mean, was it just such an incredible experience that you thought, hey, I got to share this experience? Or, um, I mean, you write a
Yeah,
blog, so obviously you're the kind of
sure.
person that likes to share experiences and stuff like that. But,
Hmm.
writing a book, for those of you who are listening who don't know, number one, you're probably not going to get rich. Number two, you're probably not going to get famous. You might
Right.
not even cover your costs with sales. Like,
Hmm.
I don't remember the stats, but you probably can recite the stats as far as the average book, how many copies they sell and stuff.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not great. It's not a
yeah.
yeah, it's not a get rich quick scheme by any stretch. So really it is more of an educational, it's a sharing thing more than anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was what it was for me. I definitely didn't get into it for money. I mean, I literally didn't know if I would sell 10 copies, and that was never the goal for me. Like, yeah, so in 2019, I started trying to do more consulting stuff for younger bands and younger artists. And so as part of that, I was like, well, I'll just start a blog, and that will kind of let people know what I do and my skill set and my knowledge base. And then after 6 8 months of that, basically shortly after I started the blog, I realized, oh, I actually really enjoy writing. So then it was like, okay, am I going to turn this into a book? And I was like, I don't know, it seems like I don't know nothing about writing a book. But then it just, by the end of the year, it became evident, like, I should probably do a book. And so I just started learning how to write a book first, which was just, a lot of looking online and whatever, and then starting to figure out what my approach was going to be. And so then I just realized, like, well, I didn't want it to read like a textbook, because that's boring. And I also wanted it to reach beyond just, it's a pretty niche industry book, but I wanted it to reach as far beyond the industry as I could. So, because a lot of the stuff that I talk about, efficiency and communication with emails and note taking and record keeping, like that transfers to many industries and just people at home doing their thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to include stories, tour stories in there as well. So people, and honestly, yeah, just so people who are just like, what's it like on the road? They could read that part of the book and get that out of that if they were just interested in that. So,
But the format's
I
really good. The format, I like how it's kind of like written like a diary, like
yeah, right.
Tuesday, August 17th, and here's what we
Hmm.
did that day. And Wednesday, August 18th, everything went to
Right,
shit.
yeah.
And, like, so I mean, you're following along with a story and, a progression of days and events and again, like that's where I got the feel of how it was growing, like how the
Yeah,
tour and the band was growing and things were getting more fun, more interesting, more complicated. Um, but really, I guess my big takeaways from the book, and I'd like you to talk about where this all came from too, is just how incredibly crazy you are with spreadsheets and systems and process. And like I have a hard time teaching CFOs and managers to be that way, let alone a
right.
production manager. And I know a few really really great production managers who you probably know as well, but some of them are more wing it, and you're not wing it. You're the opposite of
Yeah,
wing it.
and
Yeah.
hey, to each their own, and everybody has their way. And I think that was why I wrote the book, and why and I say at the end of the book, like, look, this is my method, and this is how I found that works best. Like, pick and choose from this what works for you, because everybody does stuff different. But I found it to work really well, especially when things get crazy and busy and overwhelming. It really works really well. So, all that to say, like, kind of going
Give us
back to
some
your
examples
initial.
though when you say it
Yeah,
works.
and okay, yeah. So, and that's why I included the stories in the book too, because I wanted to be able to, I don't say do this, or, do this, or this is going to happen. It's like, no, I messed this up, and here's what happened, and here's what I learned, how I learned how to
Yeah.
fix it. So, a lot of it is like, for example, just you're talking about spreadsheets. So, like, I keep an advance log, which is like every day on a tour has its own row, right? And whether it's a day off or a show day or whatever, that way visually I can see what's going on. And then there's columns for, what has been advanced. Like, okay, have I received the audio specs for this gig yet? Have I received the lighting? Have I connected the video person with the, if it's a festival day, have I connected our video person with their video person? So we're making sure everything syncs up, and that works. And I take it steps further by a lot of color coding, because I like, you want to be able to look at a spreadsheet and see immediately what's going on. You don't want to have to decipher, okay, what day's what? Okay, this day's yellow. That means it's an off day. Don't worry about it. And then, this day is a different shade because that's the same day as a show day, but it's a promo thing. Maybe we have TV. So, okay, that gets its own line. So if I'm like, okay, I look at this date, August 22nd, and there's two things that day. Okay, well, they're easy to determine which one's the show and which one's the promo gig, because they're different colors. And then also, as I look across the day, I might have some of the font is in red and some of it's green. If it's green, then I know skip by it. That's how I can go across it real quick and determine how many things still need to be addressed for that specific day. Because if it's red font, okay, yeah, like, and a lot of it is it seems no brainer, and which is why it hesitated to write the book at first. I'm like, well, this is kind of obvious stuff, but I'm like, well, not necessarily. And
I
if
don't think
if
so.
some
Yeah.
people might do spreadsheet, I actually had someone that read my book hit me up and was like, man, I was, they're a younger person in their career as a tour manager, and like I was worried that people were going to think I was crazy for all the spreadsheets and color coding I was doing. But then I read your book and I realized, oh, like I should be doing more of this. And so
Yeah.
I'm integrating even more of all these things. So, that was reassuring to me. Like, yeah, like it's not all for nothing. And some of it might seem no brainer, but it doesn't seem no brainer to everyone, which is why
Yeah.
I decided to do the book, and really break it down into like rows and columns and fonts and bold versus not bold, like just stuff like that. It's like making everything ultra efficient, so you can at a glance know where you're at in your day, at a
Yeah.
glance know where you're at in your overall advanced process.
And the flip side of that is I got to call 42 people. I got to, pull all these different folded up little notes and stickies and stuff together to
Right.
try and figure out what I was thinking when I put this thing together or whatever. Like it's a very efficient organizational system. Like I when I have a thought developing in my head about something in my business, the first thing I do is I go over to Google Sheets and open a spreadsheet and I start, putting it all together and gathering it. Either that, or I don't know if you use Mac, but there's a new thing on Apple called Freeform, which is just
Mhm.
basically sticky notes and being able to put them together and do different things and shapes and arrows and all this stuff. And
Oh, yeah, I love
it's
that.
yeah, it's just like building a diagram and anything else, but Apple, as usual, makes it really, really simple for a guy like me who
Mhm.
doesn't want to have to learn how to use Photoshop or something. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love it, and I know so many fly by the seat of your pants people who miss thousands of things, including half my own employees. And so having such a system, and by the way, so we haven't mentioned it. Your book is called The Efficient Hustle. It's that road case sitting next to your head if you're watching on YouTube. And in the in the notes on both the YouTube video and on the podcast that'll get uploaded later today, uh, you'll find the link to get to Luke and to be able to buy the book and follow his blog and everything else. So I want to make sure that we mention that. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so you mentioned that it took you like 3 years to write this book. Was
Yeah, so I will say it was about 3.5 years calendar. Now, if I, that was like started it, outlined it, got like a rough draft, and then I would go on tour for a couple months, and then I would come home and work on it for a little bit, and then I would go on tour again or do whatever, or like, I would be doing flying lessons at the time or whatever I was doing, and
well
then the
when you're doing
pandemic hit, and
front of
yeah,
house and production management, it's not like off days. Like again, something I read in the book is when everybody's sleeping on the airplane or whatever. For you, that's great time to go write another spreadsheet or go
absolutely.
put in all of this information or review your advance for the next gig or whatever. So you are a very efficient thinker, like me. Like I have this sort of rule where I try not to watch movies or read fiction when I'm on flights. So I either have to read a business book or a self-help book or something, or I have
Right.
to, watch something that's educational or whatever. Like I have to constantly be, uh, you
Yeah,
know,
I
yeah,
have trouble with the downtime too. It's like, I want to just watch a movie, but I feel like this is perfect time to do something. And
yeah,
as a production manager, yeah, like that's usually I have to do stuff. Um, so
yeah,
yeah, so all that to say, yeah, when I was going on tour, the book was on pause. Like there was no like getting to it on the off days because as I say in my book, there's if you're a production or a tour manager, there's no off days. There's show days and there's non-show days, and you're working all the time. So, the book
yeah,
would be on pause, and then they would come back, and then my wife and I moved from LA to Nashville right before the pandemic, and then the pandemic came along, and we had just moved, so I was doing a bunch of house projects, and I was taking Seth Godin's Akimbo course on writing and becoming a better
yeah,
writer.
yeah,
So it's been lots of starts and stops, but always never stopping. Like I knew that I would do the book. Like
yeah.
I'm that kind of person. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. It might just take longer than I want, but I always knew that I would finish it. Um,
And the
so
name, the efficient hustle, is that like a like organized chaos kind of thing, like a play on words or whatever, or is there some
essentially,
meaning
yeah.
to
So
it?
like when I first started my website and my blog and all that, that's the name I come up with because our this industry is essentially a hustle for sure. But I'm all about the efficiency of it, and so it
Yeah,
just it just made sense for me and what my approach and how I like to teach things or guide people and to do things the efficient way. Is like it's still a hustle, and like my efficiency the efficiencies just help you do everything, and you can still hustle, but maybe even more so
yeah,
because you're doing it efficient and you're not wasting a lot of time on any one thing, you
yeah.
know?
So I hate talking about the COVID period, but you said you were a freelancer, and obviously freelancers. I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people. Right when COVID started, when everybody was shut down in our industry, basically, I just came up with this idea to start a happy hour. Like, let's do
Mm,
this virtual happy hour once a week, where everybody gets together because nobody's got anything to do anyways, and we'll just have a drink and talk. And I
yeah.
thought it was going to be 15, 20 of my friends in the industry that would sort of revolve every week. Well,
Hmm.
it got up to like over 100 people at times,
Wow.
right?
That's
And I
amazing.
mean, it would be top lighting designers, top front house engineers, top production managers, managers, company owners,
Yeah,
whatever,
right.
account execs. Like it became kind of a who's who of the industry. And
That's
so
awesome.
people were like sending me emails saying, "Hey, I want an invite to your weekly happy hour." And I'm like, "Well, it's kind of full next week. Sorry." But but we talked a lot of people sort of off the ledge, and
Yeah,
especially freelancers. There were a lot of freelancers who were like, you know, I'm fucked. Like I literally
right.
don't know where next month's rent is coming from. I literally don't know how I'm going to feed my family. Like I'm going to have to go get a job at UPS or something. And
Right.
so how did you cope with all that?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously my schedule clear. I was on tour at the time, and I came home and wrote a blog about what happened when it shut down. And then to be honest with you, like I stopped working, but I never slowed down. Like I kept so busy. I was
Yeah, me too.
smashing buttons on my keyboard, writing a book, and trying to do a blog here or there, or like I said, house projects, and like I
Yeah,
always kept very busy.
good for
Just
you.
not a lot of things that were generating income.
Yeah.
And I was nervous and scared and trying to deal with unemployment, all that, like everyone. But I utilize the time for sure.
Yeah. Good. No, because I mean, I know so many people who, sat and ate Twinkies and watched Netflix, and I'm
Right,
not
and I just
judging
couldn't bring
anyone.
myself to do no,
Yeah.
and yeah, exactly, to each their
Yeah.
own, people did what they did,
Yeah.
but I just looked at it as like, "Man, I have a bunch of time," and all I how many times am I on the road being like, "Man, I just wish I had a bunch of time at home." Here it is,
Yeah.
dude, and go for it. So that's what I did, and that I think that kind of leading into that kind of goes back into some of the stuff I teach in the book and why I am so OCD and organized is just like do the things, do what you can while you have the time, and like I don't. If I'm advancing a show, I don't want to be at loadout and I have a cargo company that's supposed to come get stuff and they're not there. And I'm like, well, where's the phone number? Who do I need to call? It's like I worked on all that when I had the free time, so I could call. I know who to call when I need to call them, and so
Yeah.
I just let kind of I just took those lessons into COVID and be like, man, you always ask for this, so here it is, and take the good with the bad. And I did that to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
There was days,
Yeah, no, I mean, like there's so many different sayings and stuff like about, your bad planning doesn't
right?
necessitate my
My
emergency or urgency
emergency,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yep.
But no, I mean, that makes so much sense. So like if you could pull like, sorry to put you on the spot, but call it three of the biggest lessons from your book.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
if there's an 18-year-old kid right now who's aspiring to be a production manager, and he's going to start out just like you did in clubs and work his way up and end up in arenas and stadiums. What are sort of the three biggest learnings
sure.
from your book that you would give him?
Yeah, I think one of them kind of ties into what we've already been speaking on a little bit of just organization. Like, keep everything organized and keep records of everything, so there's no questions asked. Keep everything, all the incoming and outgoing information, in line, so you know what's what. So I think organization is huge. I think efficiency is huge as well. Whether it's even if you're just shooting someone a text, like make it short and sweet. But more importantly, like what I kind of dig pretty deep into in the book is efficiency with emails. Like emails there was a period we've hit the breaking point of email being amazing. Like emails have the potential to save everyone a lot of time. Like I'm not handwriting an advance letter, putting it in an envelope and stamp it and mail it and wait for a week before they get it and read it and send it back. I can
Yeah.
do that in email now, and that's very efficient. But when everybody's like, "Hey, here's one little thing," in email, and then I have to answer one little thing, or if I send them 5 questions and then they only answer 2 of them, well, then that requires another email of saying, "Hey, cool. Well, but what about thanks for those 2 answers. What about these 3 unanswered things?" Like, so, like
Or my
my thing,
biggest peeve is probably over copying people. Like copying
yeah,
people who
man,
don't need to be copied. And I
absolutely,
have this real problem where, because I'm the CEO of my company, like everybody wants to copy me on stuff, whether it's a customer who wants a special deal or it's an employee who wants a day off or whatever it is. Everybody thinks they need to copy me. And what happens is a lot of things. Like, first of all, it fills up my inbox, which is bad. But the other thing that happens is everybody below me on the totem pole figures, oh, Marcel's copied. I guess I better
Right.
just shut up and he'll answer it, right?
Hmm.
And so now you end up nobody gets an answer because I'm not going to answer it. It's not for me. It's for HR or it's for finance or it's
Right.
for somebody else, right?
And that's why we
So
all freak out because we're like, we have 100 emails in our inbox when honestly, yeah, 12 of them need our attention. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
all that to say, like that's a big thing for me in the book is just like copy the people that need to be copied, but more importantly, like make these things efficient. If the fact is, if you open an email and it's just you're like, oh man, like you're not gonna dig in and do it. You're not gonna
no,
dig in and read what I have to say and respond to what I need answers to. And so, but if you make it quick and efficient, very very quickly, I can open it and see what you're writing me about, what you need from me, and what you're offering, what you're giving me, and what you need from me, then you're more likely to get a response and we can advance the show in 2 emails back and forth instead of 10 with all these other
right.
people chiming in or not chiming in
Well,
when they
that's a
don't
good
need
point.
to. So I would
Really
say
good
that's the
point.
second thing. And then I think the third thing is just, be prepared, like you said earlier, like don't become someone else's problem. Like you like the people will say, like don't make your problem my emergency or whatever it may be. So it's like come in. I don't ever want I don't ever want something that it's part of why I'm so organized and stuff like that. I don't ever want something to happen knowing like, oh, I totally could have avoided this. Like that
Yeah,
is to me, that's the worst thing ever. If I bought something and I'm like, I don't need to be, I shouldn't have to do this right now, but I
yeah.
forgot something, or I missed something, or I forgot to tell someone something. So be prepared. Like keep these notes so you can look through and make sure your show is advanced. Or like if you're taking gear, you have 20 pieces of gear, you're going to the airport and you need to get it stamped through customs, like go to that airport's website, find out where the customs office is, so when you get there where you have to go, because the customs office might not be in the terminal that you're departing from, and like the customs office might be airside and you can't get your gear through airside, so you have to get to the airport and call the customs office and have them come out to stamp your carnet. So like be
This is just
prepared,
way
do
too
your
much
do
common
your
sense
homework.
stuff. You're gonna explode my head here. Common
I know,
sense. Oh
right?
my
That's the thing.
goodness.
It
Yeah,
seems like it, but
yeah.
man,
It's not
lessons
so
learned the
common.
hard way. So, right.
Common sense
So
ain't so common.
I think, man, being prepared and do your due diligence, do your homework, whatever it may be. I think that's definitely a thing that I try to drive home in the book as
No,
well.
very, very, very good lessons. And again, I'm going to put the link to get to Luke's site and to order his book and everything else. Honestly, like I bought it on Kindle. You can buy a
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
I guess it's not a hardcover; it's a hard copy of the book.
Yeah, you can
But
buy yep,
um,
physical or
yeah,
soft cover or
yeah.
ebook.
I'm a Kindle guy because I don't like to carry a lot of stuff with me when I travel and stuff. But
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
really easy read. It's not 800 pages. It's like 300, I think, or something. And so
Yep, yep.
it's $15 or whatever. Come on, people. Um, so I want to, I geese of gear. I'd like to talk about gear for a minute.
Sure.
You're an audio geek.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, man.
um, so you said SD12. That's sort of your console of choice.
Yeah, that's my go-to these days, SD12 or the Digico platform. I was an Avid guy for many years with the profiles and the SC48s, and things have transformed for various reasons. And I have nothing against that, the Avid platform either. It's just kind of when like for years I wasn't fluent enough on the Digico stuff, and I was like, the only way I'm going to get fluent on it is just tour with it. So I
Yeah.
made the switch just so I could get better at that. And at some point, I'll probably do the same thing for the S6L stuff and get back into that platform a little bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they
Well,
all
I mean,
have
obviously,
their pros and negatives.
Digico's the big one right now, and they're doing a good job, and their stuff is good. I haven't seen or heard much about the newer stuff, like what's it called, a Quantum.
Yeah, like
Haven't seen it
software
yet,
stuff.
but yeah.
Yeah, it's
But
pretty powerful for sure.
what about your line array of choice?
Yeah, I love the acoustic stuff. That's definitely my favorite. K1 and K2. When I had the option, I like the DMV a lot. I'm not against that by any means. So
Yeah.
those are kind of my one and two. And then beyond that, it's
S-
kind of see what the vendor has available and pick from the best. But
So I'm
I'm
up
an
in
acoustics
Canada.
guy.
I'm up in Canada right now. I'm from Calgary, and so there's this little company out of Calgary called PK Sound, and I'm sure you haven't seen it yet because most people haven't. But And I'm not employed by them or an agent of theirs or anything. So this is just me talking. I actually went in and visited with the CEO of the company a few weeks ago, and I knew their technology, but I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And basically, it's motorized line array. And so I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go in and meet with them and just learn more about the company. And I had him on the podcast. His name is Jeremy Bridges. And so I went in and I was in their showroom, and all of a sudden he said, so let's just say that, the first 4 rows, you weren't getting the sound levels that you wanted or whatever. And so he hits a button, and the bottom of the ray just tilts in like this. And you're like, oh, it was like I remember the first moving light I saw, and, because I'm old, and it was like, whoa, you can move the beam. This is incredible. And, similar feeling. And, these guys have patented the hell out of it. So there's a good and a bad to that. The bad is that, it becomes the Betamax versus the rest of the industry, right? Everybody knew Betamax was better. Again, I'm aging myself because you're like, what's Betamax? But, VHS won because there was more of them. But this seems like one of those things where it's like, as a front of house guy, once you've tried it once, like, you're doing a gig somewhere and all of a sudden there's a piece of scenery in front of, stage left or whatever. And you're like, I got to do something. Like, we're going to have to drop the system and, change something or whatever. And you can do both vertical and horizontal, by the way, adjustments. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's apparently sounds the same as everything else for the most part. Like, everybody uses the same drivers and stuff. But, I'm Canadian, so I guess I'm partial. But PK Sound, check it out if you get a chance.
I hope to see it out there and give it a go.
Yeah. So, I guess what else? So you're a front of house guy. So really it's just down to console and boxes, right? Like, what line array you like?
Yeah. For the most part, I think I have seen more and more people, when they have the ability and the space, the truck space and the budget allowance, they're getting more into some outboard gear again, which for a while was like, oh, it's all in the box and that's amazing. And plugins and all that is obviously still very prevalent. But I do see some people, post some pictures of the racks and stuff like that. And I think that, there are probably more of the old school guys,
I miss those outboard racks.
That stuff. And there's some people taking some racks out these days and just integrating with their digital consoles. And, I'm not against it either. I just like to keep things as simple as possible. And, unless I'm with an artist that I get to take all my stuff around the world, I just try to make it so I can do the same, basically spec a console and load my file and be good with it. So
yeah, you're driven by efficiency for sure.
I am. Like, I don't want to do some shows here where I have all the outboard rack and then go to a festival in Europe and not have the outboard rack, and my show is different. It sounds different. So I like
but it's weird because
continuity.
If we go back like 25, 30 years or whatever, there was a battle between lighting and sound front of house guys of size, mine's bigger, mine's bigger, mine's bigger, mine's bigger, and then all of a sudden it started going, mine's smaller, mine's smaller, mine's smaller. And, so like, you can do so much more with so much less now from a size standpoint. Why start bringing racks and outboard gear and all of this other stuff if you don't need to, right?
Man, I know, but as the old school guy in me, it's like, man, but people thought you were a lot cooler when you're standing in front of that massive Midas than the digital console. They don't know that, like, this is actually way cooler and way bigger, more powerful, but it doesn't look like it. Something to be said for that big.
Lighting was even worse, because lighting went from like the diamond whatever, Avolite's diamond whatever that was like 8 feet long, to the whole hog 2, which was this tiny little console, and everybody was like, where'd your console go? What's going on here? Yeah. Very, very weird. Again, back to your book, one of the things, like, you spent so much time on so many details, but one of the things was, as people were switching from wedges to in-ear monitors, like, just some of the things you need to think about with that. Now you're using in-ear monitors. You need to think about having spares. You need to think about cleaning them and all of this different stuff, and just how you're doing mixes for in-ear monitors versus for wedges. And
Yeah, I will say, there's probably, because I'm an audio, front of house guy by trade, there's definitely probably a little more of those audio specifics in the book, even though it's for production
of
and tour
course,
managers. Probably more audio specifics than lighting specifics. But yeah, like, yeah, that's a huge thing of, again, just efficiency and being prepared. Like, man, well, what if somebody slams their in ear in a door?
yeah,
You can't leave for tour without a backup. And most of them all have, field replaceable cables. We'll carry three of those, because
yeah,
when it comes time to need one, you can't hit up the vendor and get it. You need it now. And
yeah.
like, yeah, as a monitor, guys will appreciate, like, you have to clean those things. It seems so simple, but I've seen it happen where people are like, yeah, man, something's wrong with my left ear. It sounds wonky, and they clean it, like, oh, it's just full of earwax. Like, it's that simple. It's like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I
got to
have the
do
same
those things.
problem with AirPods. Yeah. Well, I
So
can't
it's
hear
like,
them anymore.
even in that regard, like, carry this as if you're the
Yeah.
monitor guy, carry the stuff for them to clean it. So when they're like, oh, this sounds like garbage, you're like, well, clean it. Like, give them the stuff to clean it, because musicians are musicians and they might not think of it until it's too late.
Well, and
So,
you're gonna need these things. So why not just plan to
yeah,
need them? Like you're talking about hundreds of dollars of stuff, not tens of thousands or millions of
right,
dollars, like hundreds of dollars of. And my son's a racing driver, and people are rolling their eyes right now as they listen because I always find a way to get into this
right,
topic somehow. But it's similar because good preparation fends off a lot of real big larger problems down the road. And having the components or replacing in advance components that have a high degree of chance that they're going to fail and screw up
yeah,
your race, you want to replace that
mhm,
before, maybe not after, or whatever, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I
Take
mean,
one precaution, or make one change that's going to solve 10 problems a month down the road. Like,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So what's next for you? What do you got going on? What are you planning? Any tours booked, or are you
Yeah,
just
I
sitting
have.
around waiting to get rich off your book right now?
Definitely not doing that. I'm definitely sitting around trying to do, it's everything I've done with the book. I've hired a cover designer and an editor, and throughout
Oh,
the process,
cool.
but everything I'm doing myself. So right now I'm self promoting, and like a lot of that, which involves, obviously the social media stuff, but just letting the people that I want to know about it know about it. At the end of the day, like we said earlier, I'm not doing it to make a bunch of money. At the end of the day, I did it and I wrote it because I do feel like it can really help people. A lot of aspiring, or early in their career, tour and production managers. So I just want to. I'm going to spend I think, honestly, in realistic terms, probably the next year will be on and off just promoting the book and getting the word out and letting people know about that. So that's that world. And then, as far as production goes, I'm, still freelance. So I'm trying to spend more time at home if I can. So I'm talking to some companies about maybe just being like an audio guy for a couple music festivals this year, like
Cool.
go do a week of those, and then helping a couple artists here or there with some rehearsals or something like that. And then, I am still, like I said earlier, I'm trying to not do production management if I can, and just be a front of house guy. So if the right front of house gig came about, like we said earlier, with like, if somebody offered me a front of house gig, I kind of want to be like, who's on the tour? Like, is it people I know? Are they friends? Are we going to get along good? Because if I'm leaving the house, I want to go have a good
Yeah,
time. So
quality of life.
I will definitely do some, yeah, quality of life on the road, right? Exactly. So if the right thing comes along, I'll go on the road yet this fall, and so we'll see. Yeah, I'm just kind of taking it as it comes, and not trying to hit the pavement too hard to drum up any work, but knowing that I have to work and things will come about, and just kind of being trying to be choosy and pick the right thing, and enjoy my time at home while I have it, and just so I
Smart,
can do
man.
things like promote the book and write some
Yeah.
blogs and stuff like that.
Well, and the good news is it's a great time to be a little more pick and choosy right now
Yeah,
because
there's
there's
a lot of work
so
to be
much
had.
stuff going on out there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, now is a good time to be looking around and going, yeah, that doesn't fit my lifestyle. That one does. And some people might say, well, that's it. I'm not calling Luke again because he says no. And
Right,
so
right.
be it,
And that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's okay too.
and when I do get some of those things that maybe aren't the right fit for me, the other thing, kind of, I'm trying to do as much as I can, and it kind of relates directly to the book. It's just like mentoring and like really,
Yeah.
because people for years have asked me all these different questions, which is part of why I started blogging and writing the book in the first place. It's like people ask me stuff, and so I like to help them out, and trying to find young, young people where it's audio or people that want to be a tour or production manager, and like kind of get them up to speed, and then try to help place them in the right position of like, hey,
Yeah.
this is gonna, you got to start at the beginning. You're gonna be probably touring in a van, van and trailer, but like this is what you need to do, and then help them find those gigs and get them into place. I really, that to me, that really invigorates me and kind of breathes new life into me as far
Yeah.
as it relates to the
You
industry.
just actually reminded me of something because I have a nephew here in Calgary who is at, I would say, the front end of his audio career. Um, and he's not super young, he's in his 30s, but he was a musician and then just kind of dabbled in recording and stuff while he was working in construction, and then just said, you know what, I'm going to do something for my life, for me. I want to do something I love. And he started doing front of house for, like, first in like little coffee houses and stuff, and then
Right.
bigger and bigger and bigger, and now he's doing,
Yeah, that's awesome.
relatively large club stuff in and around Alberta. And but he's really nervous about making that next leap because I keep saying, look, I'll introduce you to some of these bigger sound companies and stuff. You'll get a gig. I mean, you'll be on a tour
Right.
a month from now. And he's like, I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready. So I'm gonna actually send him your book,
That's awesome. Yeah,
and
man, take the leap. At some point, you
yeah,
just got to do it because the work's out there, and as long as you come in wanting to work with the knowledge, whatever knowledge base you're at and skill level
yeah,
you're at, you'll
yeah,
get work. And I think that's kind of, to me, the like cues me up to how much I'm willing to help someone is if they'll hit me up and they're like, here's what I want to do. I've done this and this and this. I've researched all this. Like, they just kind of need a little guidance. That's what I love to see when people are like super ambitious and want to do it. Where some people hit me up and like, help, like, teach me everything, and like,
can you
just
introduce me to
place me in
Taylor
a
Swift?
gig. Yeah, yeah. It's like, no, you're not. Like, if they're not out there super ambitious and
Yeah,
asking their own questions and stuff like that, you kind of
yeah.
get a vibe that, okay, you really don't want to do it.
Well,
But
you're
if
gonna
the
hear
people
from
that
my
really want to do it,
you're going to hear from my nephew Adam. So
let's go.
I guarantee I'm going to send him to your website, and I'll send him your book, and
Cool,
get him moving. So
cool.
how do
That's
people
great.
reach you?
The best way is just go to my website, theefficienthustle.com. You can hit me up directly. My email's there. All the info on the book's there. All my blogs, all that stuff. Yeah, that's the best way. The emails go directly to me, and I get people back pretty quick. If people are more into social media and that, you can always direct message me on Instagram. Everything I have, Facebook, Instagram, it's all The Efficient Hustle.
Perfect. Thank you so
I
much
love
for
to hear
doing
from
this.
people.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this, and I've learned a bit, and I'll keep pushing people to your book. I like your book. I think it's great, and
Awesome. Well,
enjoy
I do
reading it.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do appreciate all the help with the promo and spreading the word. And it's, like I said, it's an honor to be part of Geezer's Gear. I'm a part of a esteemed group of people now, and I love
We'll bring you back on when you're a little older.
that. When I'm a geezer, all right, let's do it.
All right, Luke. Thanks so much, man.